Hello, today is June 27th, 2024. I'm meeting today with Mr. Mike Yoder at his home in Loveland, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans History Project. Welcome, Mike, and thanks for sitting down today to tell your story.
Okay, you're welcome.
Let's start out, if we could. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your date of birth, where you were born, a little bit about your family.
All right. I was born January 17th of 1948 in a little town called Newton, Kansas. And shortly after I was born, my parents moved to Fort Collins, Colorado, so my dad could finish his master's degree at CSU. And they liked it so well, that's where I ended up for junior high, grade school, high school.
Up in Fort Collins, or just
Fort Collins.
In Fort Collins. And any siblings?
I have a brother that's 5 years younger than me. I have a sister that's 11 years younger than me. So there's three in our family. And my sister and I are very close. My brother and I are not so close because he lives so far away.
Yeah.
My sister lives in Fort Collins, so we get together a lot.
Okay. So you grew up in Fort Collins. Any fond memories that you want to talk about?
Well, you know, grade school, junior high is just routine.
Yeah.
The only thing I like to mention, and people at my age and stuff will remember this, when I was in junior high, and we used to have hunter safety course in the gym. And then afterwards, we would go out behind the school and sight our rifles in.
At the old, Fort Collins High?
No, this is out at LaPorte.
LaPorte, okay.
In LaPorte.
Okay.
I was going to junior high in high school out of LaPorte.
Gotcha.
First 2 years, and then I finished my last 2 years of high school in Fort Collins.
Okay.
But yeah, that's something that they don't do anymore, that they should. Yeah, I just really feel strong that the school should implement that in the program if they can. But yeah, that's my personal opinion.
Right.
So after high school,
Which was, you graduated what, 66?
I graduated in 1966
Yeah.
from Poudre High School.
Okay.
And from there, I went to work at Heath Engineering in Fort Collins. I worked there in a machine shop for a while, and then I was fascinated with the control systems. So I asked if I could learn the electronics and how to assemble the control systems and stuff. And I was doing that, and I was fascinated by it. And the boss, you know, I kept asking him so many questions. How does this work? What's this do? What does this do? And he finally says, that's it. And I said, what am I matter? He says, you're going to school. So he says, they sent me to Southern Colorado State in Pueblo to get a degree in electronic technology.
Really? Yeah.
And so the Vietnam War was going on, right. And I just, thought, well, maybe I'll finish school, won't have to go. So I finished school, and a good buddy of mine says, hey man, I got this really cool job in California. And he says, why don't you come out and go, meet me out there. It was my best buddy in high school and junior high, friends forever. And so I said, okay, so we took off, went out there, and I got a job working in Santa Barbara, California, and working for a company that makes radio broadcast equipment and TV. And I was the technician on the final assembly doing the final alignment and quality control before they were shipped to the customer. I was out there having a great time, a couple of single guys out in Southern California in the 60s, what's wrong with that? And my mom calls me. She says, you got your draft notice in the mail. And I says, no, Mom, don't worry about it. I'm in California, they don't know here. And she says, okay. 2 months later, she calls me back, and she says, you got this letter I had to sign for. It says, report from induction, you got 6 days to get here. I said, really? She says, it was a registered letter, and I signed for it, so they know. But they, I said, well, I suppose I should, So I told my bosses I just got drafted, and I'm heading back to Colorado. So I came back, reported in Denver, and then basic training was in Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
How soon after you got back to Colorado did you ship off then to basic?
I was back in Colorado about 3 months. I reported, took my induction physical, and they says, okay, we'll call you. And so I was just kind of hanging around waiting. And so after 30 days, I went and found a job, And so I was another almost 5 months before I got the call to come and report.
Huh.
And so that, that was all happened in December, and it was June when I was sent to basic training.
Wow. Wow.
So.
And how was that? How was that transition going from a carefree California civilian life into military life? Was that much of adjustment?
It was 100% totally different than anything I'd ever done before, as you'd expect, because it's military, and I didn't know anything about military. So basic training was about what I expected basic training to be: a bunch of harassment, physical training, learn about the military rules and procedures, and so I went through basic training. Nothing really special happened there. After basic training, the only thing that was interesting, it would be interesting for anybody else, is the guy that bunked above me was a black guy, and this is the mid '60s, and some parts of the United States aren't friendly to black people at that time. So we finished basic training, and him and me and another guy that we got to be friends at basic. We said, let's go to. We had a weekend off. I said, so let's go to Nashville, because Nashville, Tennessee is like 15 miles from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So we went to Nashville. Of course, we didn't have anything but our uniforms, so we got our basic training uniforms. We just got our basic. And so we went there, and myself and this other guy were over 21, but the other guy wasn't. So, in Kentucky, some of the places didn't, ask for ID, and some of them didn't. We found a local bar that we all went in there. We walked right in, and then the one guy that was checking IDs and stuff, he can't come in, he's black. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I thought, what do you mean he can't come in, he's black? That was what hit my head.
Yeah.
And he says, don't worry about it. He says, that happens in the South and stuff. He says, I'm used to that. And I says, no, you shouldn't be used to that. That's not right. And I says, you're no different than me, just because your color's black.
Yeah.
We're both in the Army. We both finished basic training. Who knows where we're going from here? And the guy says, well, I appreciate you saying that. And the other guy that was with me, there was the three of us, he felt exactly the same way. So I just wanted to mention that growing up in Colorado, we had no racial issues at all. Where the South and the Northeast and stuff, there was all kinds of racial issues, but there wasn't any in Colorado.
Right.
My best friends were Mexicans.
Yeah.
I had an Indian friend, a bunch of Mexican friends. They were, we're all buddies in high school. There's no difference.
Yeah.
So black guy, there's no difference to me either. I never knew anything about racial prejudice.
Yeah.
So after basic training, I had a week off before I started my AIT, Advanced Individual Training, for people that are not familiar with military terms.
Good.
Came back to Fort Collins and talked to Mom and stuff, and the guy that decided I would take my car back to the AIT. I knew I was going to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. I had never been to New Jersey in my life, so I knew it would be a trip out there. So I got the map out. This is back before digital stuff, so you get the map out and you take a look. And I had a friend that was at basic with me that lived in Denver, and he was going to the same place. So I says, I'll pick you up and we can ride together and share gas. And he says, sure. So we picked him up and we drove out to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and we processed in, and he went to a different place than I did, so I lost track of him. I saw him once other time, but he had different MOS, he had different, and I went to fixed plat carrier equipment repair, 32 Echo.
Well, now, was that based on your experience with your work experience and degree, or
yes.
Did you test for that, or
yes,
you just
I did.
phone? Okay.
Yeah, I did. I tested for that. So they sent me to that school, which is a piece of electronic equipment that does the interface between the microwave to actual voice, and it also it's a multiplexer, and I don't want to go into too deep
Yeah.
much details, but it's just it's a piece of electronic equipment that translates microwave signals into actual words. Because when it goes out in microwave, it's all microwave stuff. So I went to that school, and at the end of that school, they took the top 10% of the class and offered us another school, a school called circuit conditioning. And so I did that, but I need to make a little stop in between there, because in the process of going to the school, my guy that bunked above me was dating this girl that he met, and he says, she has a sister, would you like to come along? And as everybody knows the stories, yeah, okay. And I said, nah, I don't think so. So he told me a couple weeks later, I'm going back up again. What are you doing? You got nothing to do, why don't you come up? I said, all right. So I rode up with him, and that's where I met Sharon, which is my wife. And I got along fantastic with her dad the first day. Not so much with Sharon. She agrees. Not so much the first day. But so that was, so I had a good chat with her dad. He had all kinds of questions. And he was a World War II vet, so later on I went back up again, and as they say, it's history, we decided that we actually liked each other. We dated quite a bit all the way through my second school. And when that school was finished, I got orders to go to Germany. So we discussed it, and she couldn't go unless we were married. So we decided to get married so she could go to Germany with me. Well, in the process of taking 2 weeks off to go get married and stuff, I got back, my orders were changed. Instead of going to Germany, I was going to Vietnam.
Oh.
And so that was not good news from, I kind of thought, that may happen, but you never know. So our best idea of getting married so she could go with me to Germany didn't work out. So I went to, this was in June of 1970. And so I was in school in New Jersey from late August all the way through June of the next year. I spent almost a year in school, and in the process I got E3, E4, and E5, and so next thing on the agenda was catch the plane from Fort Dix, New Jersey, to the Air Force Base in San Francisco. And then we were there before we processed through and hopped on a plane to head to Vietnam. Our route to Vietnam was, first stop was Anchorage, and then the next one was Tokyo, and then Tokyo to Hotel 3 Saigon in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And
let me ask you, do you remember, you're sitting on the plane with a lot of time to kill and a lot of time to think. Do you have any thoughts that, as you were going into Vietnam, any worries, any thoughts? Well, you remember what was going through your mind as you're coming?
Actually, at that time, I wasn't really thinking too much. I knew that if I was in the south part of the country, it'd be pretty hot. If it was in the north part of the country, it had seasons. I didn't really know what to expect from military-wise.
Yeah.
There's a war going on, and I knew what I would be doing, and and in general, I really didn't have any particular thoughts. Everything was more wait and see. And when we got off the plane at Hotel 3 Saigon, which everybody landed in, and then Thompson Air Base is either one of the two places, they're right next to each other. They opened the door, and I was to step off the plane. I thought I was going to die on the spot. Being a Colorado guy, dry, cool climate, hot, humid, I just absolutely thought there's no way I can breathe. I will not be able to make it. I can't breathe. It's just too humid and too hot. Well, so that was my first thought immediately. I said, how can I survive the weather? So we got in, we processed in. It was typical processing. You go through a bunch of, all that stuff, and then you wait around until you find out where you're actually going to be. And I found out that I was going to First Signal Brigade, Charlie Company, which their headquarters were brigade headquarters were in Vung Tau, up on a hill, and the company headquarters, which was in Canto, where Charlie Company was the company where I was assigned. So I was there a couple days, and then you get on a helicopter, on a Chinook, and they flew us into Vung Tau. And when I was there a couple of days, it's a very interesting place. It was probably the highest elevation south of the Mekong River. It's just, they call it Vung Tau Hill. And we landed at the air base, and then to go up top the hill is where the battalion headquarters were for the Signal Corps. So we rode up in the Deuce and a Half, and this is interesting to me because as we're riding up, we're seeing all kinds of monkeys on the road. And the monkeys are throwing stuff at us and trying to pee on us. I was just, stuck out because, and we got, that was just something that popped up until we got to Vung Tau. Then it was a typical military base as far as there were quite a few people there, and we processed in, and they told you, they told me that you're going to Canto, see company, and you'll be working your MOS there. So then another truck ride all the way down the hill, and another, I guess it was about 2.5 hour truck ride till we finally got to Canto.
Wow.
And Canto was a fairly large army base.
Well, now, with that drive, was there any concern? I mean, as far as Viet Cong or coming under attack?
I had no concern. From my standpoint, I just was riding along back loose enough. Everything was quiet. There was no, because we were in the south, and the south was pretty much controlled by the VC. The North Vietnam regulars and stuff were up north, where the North Vietnamese Army were.
Right.
In the south, we dealt with the Viet Cong, which were sporadic, and a bunch here, a bunch there, and so we got to Canto and processed in there. And so immediately you have somebody that's been there a while that gives you the basics and gets you up to speed. And this guy's name was Steve, and he said, okay, he took me in, he said, here's the bunks, and here's where you're going to bunk, which was a great big tent.
Oh, okay. And
lots of bunks in the tent. It was sectioned off, so we could, it wasn't one just great big open. They had all it sectioned off. They had the 2 before walls with plywood and sections off, so you could have some aspect of a minor bit of privacy.
Yeah.
Not a lot. But and then the mess hall was right across probably 20 yards from where the tent was, where I was bunking, and we had just tossed my bag and stuff on the bunk, and the air raid siren went off, and he grabbed me and he says, follow me. And we went right into the bunker, and we heard a couple of bombs drop, and it was noisy. Being a rookie, I had no idea what to expect, what was going on, and this guy being there, he grabbed me and ran me into the bunker. We were in there with about 3 other guys, and then when the all clear sound came out, and half the mess hall was gone. They were aiming the rockets for the ammo dump, which was on the other side of the mess hall. They missed the ammo dump and got the mess hall. Yeah. And that was the first day in country in Vietnam, as far as the first day in Canto.
What? I just can't imagine what's going through a person's mind experiencing that. Right?
Well, and I heard it go off, and I thought, well, that's a rocket or a cannon or something. I didn't know the sounds. And the guy that told me said, no, that's that what you heard is a rocket. And sometimes you'll hear mortars, and you'll know the difference, and you'll know if they're incoming or outgoing and how close they are. You'll get used to that. And I said, okay, Simon. So the rest, I was at Canto for the first 2 months there, and I was learning my MOS, doing real-time operations with carrier equipment, and then they sent me to do some crypto work. So my second got a little to be able to run the crypto gear, and that was that was super important because that's where everything got scrambled.
Yeah, right.
And so I went through a 2-week school of crypto gear, and went back using my MOS, and then they decided that they need a team to go set up fire bases and take down fire bases, and I got volunteered. Because I knew carrier equipment, I knew the technical control stuff, and I knew crypto. And I had the rank, and they said, you're the crew chief, you got 3 guys that are going to work with you, and you're going to travel around, and you're going to, go to fire base, and you can maintain it until we tell you if you're going to take it down or go someplace else.
And now, for those that are watching, a fire base is an outer base that isn't a big army base. It's
fire bases can be as small as 100 feet by 100 feet, or they could be as large as maybe. The largest fire base I was at was at Vung Tau, and that was probably football field size.
oh, gee.
That was the largest. Then I went to Kamau, and Kamau was, the fire base there was about the size of a normal house. And it was just a platform with some barbed wire around it, and a couple outposts were, and then our communications equipment, which was deuce and a half with equipment on the back, and some equipment on the ground, and a microwave tower, right, and then a generator behind it to keep everything running.
I guess what I was posing that question is, I mean, you're not inside a secure large base. You're out. You're out in the thick of it.
This is no base there. Usually there was 1 or 2 squads of either infantrymen or sometimes there were some CBs there if they were trying to make some road or something. And sometimes there was occasionally there would be some MPs. And people came and go all the time. People processed in, processed out, and so after Kamau, next one I went to was Vinh Long, which was about half a football field size, a little better. There was actually a couple of tents there, and there was 3 squads of infantrymen there, and a squad of artillery guys, and so there was a few more people there, but we were all in tents, cots and tents, and so then from there I went to Sadek, and I was there Sadek for probably 6 months. My last 6 months over there I was at Sadek because they went there and set it up, and things were beginning to start winding down a little bit. This is in late '71 or mid '71, and so we were there, and then pretty much just stayed there until I got a call from the CO when I was at Sadek, and he says, "I would like to go home." And he says, "Well, I got 5 days left." He says, "If you want to go home, we got a spot for you to go today." I says, "When do you want me there?" And he says, "As soon as you can get here." I said, "I'll be there and as soon as I can get transportation."
Wow.
So I got to come home 5 days, less than a year.
Wow. Now, during that year's time, did you ever get an R&R?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I took an R&R. I came back to the States.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, I come back to the States for a week, 2 weeks, and I told the wife, I got a message to her that I was going to R&R and what time, and so she met me. She was still staying in New Jersey with her parents, living with her, and so we met at my parents' house in Fort Collins, because as I flew in, and so she was there waiting for me. She had already flew in there, and she got there before I did, because I flew into Stapleton then. It wasn't DIA. There was no DIA. It was Stapleton Airport. Flew into Stapleton, and my dad came down, picked me up, and brought me back to the house. And where she was there, it was good to see her after about, that was not quite 6 months, it was about 5.5 months in, and I had dog. You know, you go when an opportunity.
Yeah, right.
It's some, you know, and so, and some people say, well, you know, on the flight back, there was 4 or 5 of us that were home on R&R, we're going back. Everybody else was on the flight were newbies, never been there before. And they were full of questions to all of us that had been there before. And they could tell we'd been there before. Our fatigues were been washed a number of times. They were well used. And so, you know, it was really obvious who'd been there before, and all the guys with their brand new super clean fatigues on it didn't have a bit of dirt on it, so, or hadn't been washed. And well, I'll go back to Canto for a little bit. We stayed there, like I said, I was there for a while, and it was just a pretty good size army base. It covered, I don't know, probably, I don't know how big Canto is. I would say it was probably a mile by half a mile. A lot, probably, there was probably 500 to 1,000 people there in Canto. There were a lot of MOSs, a lot of stuff, a lot of what's going on in Canto. So they had a PX there, and I was fortunate enough to, I was still processing in, so I really wasn't doing a job per se yet. And the guy says, PX is open, I'll show you where it's at. So I walked in there, and there was the 2 biggest commodities that are worth a fortune in South Vietnam were a fan and a refrigerator. They show up the PX randomly, you know, maybe once a month, maybe not 3 months before they show up again, and you have a ration card. And on the ration card, you're ration 1 refrigerator, 1 fan. And you have to show your ration card, and same with beer and cigarettes and all that, that was all on your ration card. And you used MPC, Military Payment Certificate. You didn't use Vietnamese money. So I got there, and since I was new, and they had a fan there and they had a refrigerator there, and I happened to be there at the right time, I bought a fan and a refrigerator right there on the spot, which was great, because I had a fan that I could blow on me in the tent, and I had a refrigerator, and we had electricity and it plugged in. And so I went over, bought a bunch of beer and a bunch of soft drinks, put it in the fridge, and I sold beer and cold soft drinks out of the fridge. It was a very good money-making deal. And you know, it was very profitable for the 3 months I was at Canto. And then when I left Canto, I knew I wouldn't be able to take the fan refrigerator with me, so I sold both of them. And I got the same price I paid for it after even used, because they were rare. And I took my profit money and sent a check back to my wife with most of the profit. And I won't say how much. I just didn't keep that secret. Fair enough. It was a good, profitable business, and at the same time, since I had all this extra money, there were a lot of GIs, a lot of guys in Canto that were out dating Vietnamese people, girls and stuff, or shacking up with them or whatever. So they were always needing money. So I would loan them $20 and for a 25 a payday, and I'd usually loan 4 or 5 every month. You know, $20, and then the payday they had to pay me back 25. And I had one guy that said, I don't have any money. So I called the CO. I says, you know, they know what you're doing. None of that. That's all common practice. So I told the CO, I said, so and so here hadn't paid me back the 20, you know, my loan. And he says, I'll talk to him. So he went in, and the guy said, well, I don't have it to spend it all. And so payday came around CO gave me the money he owed me. He would have took it out of his pay. So yeah, so I got in pretty good with the CO because I did some stuff for him, and it's just different things happen. But then once I said that, it was pretty mild there. Not much happened. The only one that was really interesting was when we were at Rockjaw for a day. We flew in there because they were having issues with the VC there, and the VC were quite avid in there, and they decided that it was not safe to keep it there, so we went there to take it down. And just as we got everything packed up and the Chinook came in to load it all up in there, and we got it all in there and loaded up and got out just in time before they overran the base. So, and when we were at Sadek, since that was such a small place, it was, my house is bigger. And there was, say one squad of, there was one squad of MPs that pulled guard duty. There was a squad of infantry guys that went out and did patrols. And then the five of us that were that did the techie stuff, we maintained all the communications. And that was so critical. Communications is everything. And so we had when those guys got done, they'd run out in the field and they'd come back for a day or whatever until they were, got orders to go back out and check out a different location. We'd sit around, play poker. That's about the only thing we had for entertainment. Yeah. And everything, something that all the military guys know, but I've told to a lot of the people, is I spent 9 months over there and never saw a flush toilet.
Really? Wow.
For 9 months, when I said Rockjaw, Kamek, Sadek, Gungtao, none of those places had, it was all pit toilets or out in the field. It was all swamps. That area is all swamp. In general, it's all swamp. There's rice paddies, and occasionally you'd see a house, a hut, grass hut, and it was whoever was taking care of the rice paddies, and it was just swamp, rice paddies. Well, it was 2 seasons in the South. Hot and wet and hot and dry. 6 months of hot and wet, 6 months of hot and dry. During the hot and wet season, it rained every single day, sometimes all day long. And so everything on your cot, when you got up to go to work, if you had day shift, everybody worked 12 hours. We did, because in the communications, we'd go in there, 12 hours on, 12 off, 24/7. And so we had, the 5 of us, we had to rotate around. We had to have 2 on, 1 standby, and 2 off. And the generator guy was the unluckiest one, because he was on for his 12, and when he was off, he still had to be on standby in case something happened to the generator, because we only had 1 generator guy.
Yeah.
1 generator guy, 1 tech controller, and 2 tech controllers. And the tech controller was the carrier guy, and backed me up on crypto, and I did take a carrier and crypto, and then I backed up the tech control guys when they wanted some time off, or they had opportunity to get some time off, or get a ride into Bin Long, where the closest PX was. And so we rotated around. But I always took the night shift. I didn't mind being up all night. Because everything happened at night.
Yeah.
When the VC came in, they came in at night. And I didn't want to be waking up. I wanted to be on duty when that happened. So, we had a couple instances with some VC came. One time we had the infantry guys came back, and they came back in a hurry, and there is almost half a company of VC out there, and they're on their way. We had to get back here. And so I called in support. Called in there, and the Huey and the Cobras came out, and because they were on their way, and they pointed it, and they gave me the coordinates of where they were at, and we saw the Cobras come over across, and the Cobras went and just did their run, and there was no more VC. Wow. And it was at night, because they always attacked at night, never in the daytime, always at night, because they had the rice paddies to take care of during the day. It was at night, and watching the Cobras firepower at night was incredibly impressive, because it looked like there was one solid stream of light, but they only had a tracer every 6 rounds. And so between each one of those tracers, there was 5 rounds, but it looked like it was solid. And they go, and then everything was quiet.
Wow.
And they went out the next day to verify kills and stuff. And I don't remember the number, but there was quite a few. And I'm sure some made it out and some didn't, but there was an awful lot of kills on that run. That was the only time I saw, a combat run from our little fire base. But everything was, that was pretty much my Vietnam right there. Running the fire bases and I got my 2 weeks at home came back to visit the wife and then when I got the call from the CO, it says you got a trip home. So, and there was another guy, one of the guys that were in the MPs that was there, got to come home at the same time, because when I answered the phone for the CO, he says, you, and he told me the guy, Corporal so-and-so, he's got his early out too, so you tell him you guys are both coming. We'll send a Huey out to pick you up. Everything was by airplane, helicopter.
Helicopter, yeah.
In the swamps, there's no other. Yeah. There were very few roads, and it was only they were the high mounds that went between. It was really, really rural all over the South at that time there, unless you were close to, say, Vinh Long or Canto or some of the cities. Canto was closer to the coast, and Sadek was right close to the Mekong River, because they had a Navy patrol boat base right there, and that's when we got good food, when we was at Sadek, because we go over and eat at the Navy.
So when you were jumping around, working these various fire bases, it was all in the South. You never got up to
north, always in the South,
okay.
Deep South. I never got north of the Mekong River.
Okay.
Always in the South the whole time. So I say I didn't. Some of the guys up north, they had cool weather sometimes and snow on some of the mountains. I was in hot, humid the whole time.
We'll talk a little bit about that, because you said that furnace blast when you first opened the door, being a Colorado boy, northern Colorado, which has idyllic climate. I mean, there's no perfect weather than Colorado.
Basically,
How was that for you? Did you ever get adjusted to it, or was it?
Like I said, when I first got off the airplane, I thought I wouldn't make it, and all the time, I had a hard time adjusting to it. And I got to Canto, and Canto was right close to the ocean, so it wasn't as humid because there was some ocean breeze. Now, close to the ocean, I mean 3-4 miles. Not right on the ocean. Right. It was 3 or 4 miles in, and but so it was. By the time I spent some time at Canto, I adjusted pretty much. But when I was at all the fire bases, when the rainy season comes, you just you make sure you got everything up someplace where it doesn't get wet, and make sure and of course mosquito net. Always had a mosquito net on, because mosquitoes were terrible. Big mosquitoes are horrible. If you didn't sleep with mosquito, you would get bit all over. Oh. Yeah. So everybody had a mosquito net, and off top of your cot, you had a couple of 4 little poles, and you put the mosquito over, and you just flipped it up, and then when you got out, and then you flipped it down, and you tried to find. Most everybody it was a big tent, and if you call it a big tent, it's about the size of this kitchen. That's a big tent. Yeah. So we did the best we could with if we found some wood or any type of piece of metal, we'd find out something, we'd use it to put underneath there to try to raise things up, and try to have during the rainy season, did everything you could to keep dry, which you never did. I don't ever, during the rainy season, I don't ever remember being dry. It was so humid. Humidity would be 85 to 95% all during the rainy season. And I never ever remember being totally dry. The only time I was dry was when I was in there with the communications equipment, because it was a big box, about the size of a you see the boxes that are on the ships.
Containers.
It's about half a container size. where we had all our communication. Sometimes they were on the back of a deuce and a half, sometimes they were on the ground. And if it was, fire bases had been there for a while, like Vin Long, and they had it on the ground. SEDEC started out on the back of the deuce and a half, then they bought a bigger one, and we put it on the ground after it was there for a while, because they figured, they didn't want to put anything on the ground like that if they figured it would be close to being overran or would have issues. But since we were close enough to the Navy, there at SEDEC, they figured we had a container that had all our communications equipment in.
Now, would that be air conditioned?
Oh, yeah, it was air
Okay,
conditioned. Had to be.
I couldn't imagine.
No, the containers were all equipment had to be air conditioned.
Okay.
So, but you go in there and be working in there for 4 or 5 hours and you step outside, and so we pretty much, as we rotated our shifts, we pretty much, you just stayed in there, and then when you come out, you stayed out until you went back in, because the difference between the temperature and humidity from inside and outside, inside no humidity, all air conditioned, temperatures stayed at 69 to 72 inside, where it was 89 to 92 outside. Wow.
Did you ever, between the wet and the jungle, the mosquitoes, did you ever succumb to any of the diseases or any of the, get sick from any, just living in those conditions, jungle rot or anything like that?
Some people did. I was fortunate I never got sick, never had jungle rot, never. I kept all of my boots and stuff high and dry all the time. I paid very careful attention to boots and pants. Of course, I just wore a OD green t-shirt because it was just too hot for anything else.
Yeah.
The only time you put your uniform shirt on over your t-shirt was if you was going someplace, like if we were going to Navy to eat, or if we had a trip to Vin Long, which was the closest base of any size where we'd go to get. And there was a road. Initially there was not a road, but the Seabees actually built a quasi-road so we could get from SEDEC to Vin Long. So I got that built. One trip in the Jeep from SEDEC to Vin Long, you had the driver, shotgun, and that guy on the back, the M60 was. And all the Jeeps had M60s written on the back. We had one Jeep. And we'd go to Vin Long, and we'd fill the Jeep up with fuel, and we'd bring a 52 25-gallon barrels of diesel fuel back with us to keep the generator running. And that trip would be, about every 3 days somebody took the trip to Vin Long to go get diesel fuel and food.
And just that single Jeep would go between? Yeah. It seemed like it'd be like setting ducks out there.
You could see for miles because it's just swamp, just flat.
Okay.
And it's rice paddies.
Okay.
Occasionally you look out there, you'd see a little Quonset hut where Papa-san, Mama-san, and family, and then they would, when they did stuff, they would go into one of the towns, like Vin Long or SEDEC didn't have a town. It was just they go into Vin Long, which was, Vin Long had some stores. It had a supermarket, it had a type of hardware store, supermarket. But they called it a supermarket. It wouldn't, in our terms, it would be a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
And then there would be people there selling fish and selling rice, fish, and another type of stuff, and their favorite sauces and stuff that smelled so bad. I don't know how they could stand to eat them. But this is it.
Now, did you have much interaction with the locals at all?
Very little.
Yeah.
I had very little. The only time, the last 2 months I was at SEDEC, since things were winding down. This is mid-71, and things were beginning to wind down. People were getting early drops like I did, and they were not needing as many people there. The whole situation was kind of winding down. A lot of people were moving out, so I forget what my thought pattern was there, but so there was that little store there, and occasionally we would, a lot of times, there were times when we were short on food, and I'd call into Vin Long and ask the guys hey, can you bring us out some food? A little short here.
Jeez.
And if it was, a lot of times, most of the time they brought it out back Huey. They come out, and the Hueys would come once a week with mail.
Oh, all right. Yeah, talk a little bit about that.
And that when the Huey showed up with mail, that's what everybody looked forward to. Mail from home.
Yeah.
Package from home. A package from home. That was, my wife sent me all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And in it, initially, when I was at Cantil, they all came through. As soon as I started going to fire bases, it took stuff, showed up, who knows, whenever, if it followed you, they know where you were at, so we get some food. The best we had, Tony, which was on my crew, who was pretty much my equal. He was when I was he was either in charge or I was in charge. On the shifts he was in charge. And Tony's wife sent at Christmas time a rum cake, and it got there.
Really? Yeah.
Not, 2 days after Christmas, but it got there. And oh man, that was the best thing we had. We all sat around, and everybody there, the 5 of us, and we had rum cake, homemade rum cake. That was the highlight.
Wow.
That was the highlight of the Christmas season.
Now, primarily when you were out on the fire bases, was it rations, or were you getting decent food? Or?
Sea rations.
Sea rations.
Yeah, it was rations all the time. All the time. The only time we started getting regular food was, like, say, when I was in Sadek and I go over to Navy to eat.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it was sea rations.
Oh,
Sea rations. Yeah. And, and sometimes when people would go to Vin Log, they would go into that store there and we would get some fish, and we'd come back and cook fish, fresh fish, or as fresh as it would be. We had some fresh fish, and of course, a lot of the Vietnamese food, other than rice, if you liked rice, you were in good shape. But, you actually got tired of rice. I got really tired of rice.
Yeah.
And there was always rice to eat, so you never starved and you'd eat rice. But a steady diet of rice. The locals did, but us guys, we didn't particularly care steady diets of rice. And that's why I don't eat rice since I got back.
Yeah.
I haven't had any rice since I got back.
Is that right?
It just brings back memories, and it's just the taste of, I don't hate rice. It's just, I'd eat rice if I needed to. Rice is, I just don't eat it.
Well, how do you, I look at as you told your story and your conditions. I mean, hygiene was awful. You were in these, out in these conditions foreign to you. You probably you were sleeping, but probably not getting great sleep. You probably weren't eating well. I mean, any one of those conditions could knock a man down, but then on top of that, you had the stress of war. I mean, how do you think you kept going through that time period?
The letters from home.
Really, huh?
When people got letters from home, that made your day. And then you had something to look forward to. The day you get to go back home. And we all had short calendars.
Yeah.
You probably heard that term before. We all had short calendars, and you scratch the day off. And as soon as you get down to the 30 days, you walk around, I'm short.
Wow.
Yeah, so and then we had some guys that when we were at Canto, there were some guys that had been at Canto for a while, and they went home and came back. And because if you signed up for an extra 6 months, you were out. Some people that had a 3-year commitment, and the key was if you go back to where you were and maintain your same position, and you serve 6 more months, then you were out of the Army as soon as you got back. And there were a number of people who did that just because they wanted out, and I didn't take that option. No.
You had a 3-year commitment, or what was your?
I had a 3-year commitment.
Okay, yeah.
And so I spent 2 years and 6 months. I got a 6 months out.
Yeah.
When I got back from when we got the drop, we got back, and the guy was flying out with me, and we were talking together. We were both married, and so we were sitting there carrying on conversations, and he got an early drop too, and we're on the plane. We left Hotel 3 Saigon. There was no way to contact tell anybody at home when we were coming back, because we got it early and we were just on the plane. And we were flying to Anchorage, and they said, we're gonna have a 5 to 6 hour layover at Anchorage. We've got to refuel the plane, they got to do some stuff. So you guys will have some time in Anchorage. So we got to Anchorage, and we were discussing whether we'd call the wives or not, because we could have phone service, because
Yeah.
Vietnam, your phone service was only through the military, or Mars. And so we debated, I said, we were both talking about, should we call our wife? I don't know, should we just surprise them, should we call? I thought, wow. I ended up deciding I'd call. So I called Sharon and told her I got a 5-day early and when I would be in. And she was super happy.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
And how was that jumping back between, initially going to Vietnam, and then you had your R&R, came back and forth, jumping back between civilization and a third world, or out in the boonies. I mean, it wasn't like in World War II where the guys had 6 weeks on a ship to decompress. I mean, literally within 24, 48 hours, you were from one condition to the next. It seems to me that would be a hard adjustment, or a strange adjustment.
well, I tell you, like I said, we didn't have an awful lot of food there.
Yeah.
I went over to Vietnam weighing 190 pounds. I came back weighing 140. I had lost 50 pounds in the year over there. Matter of fact, when I got off the plane at Stapleton, and Sharon walked right past me, she didn't even recognize me because I'd lost so much weight. Because there were other military people. She walked right past me. I'm looking at her, and I went like this and watched her just walk right past me. And I went over and tapped her on her shoulder. Said, "Hey!" Then she turned around. And she says, "Wow!" And then she gave me a big hug.
Yeah.
Because I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'1", and at 140 pounds, I was skin and bones.
String bean, yeah.
String bean.
Wow.
That just. You didn't have any fattening food. You didn't have food that, you didn't have mashed potatoes and gravy or steak or hamburger or any of that stuff.
Did it take you long to adjust to get back to eating normally again? I mean,
It was, no, when you saw you had food, no, that didn't take any time, man. You were just, got home, my parents fixed a big dinner, and oh man, it's so nice to have U.S. food. Green beans and casserole and stuff. Oh, it was just great. Dad had charcoaled some steaks on the grill from the first night I was back.
oh man.
So that was just,
Oh, I can't imagine.
and
how
it
nice
took a while to put the weight back on. But see, when I got back, I actually had about 9 months left to do on my 3-year tour. No, about 10 months. So the thing I always got the biggest kick out, when you're coming back from Vietnam, you've got all your Vietnam medals on, you got your insignia, you got your stripes, and you got the ribbons saying where you were at when you're processing back in the States. They give you all as soon as you get back to the States, you put your combat ribbons and stuff on, your stripes and all your combat stripes, and you process in. I went back to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, where I went to school. That's where I was sent back to after I got back. We processed in at Fort Dix first, and then from Fort Dix they sent everybody out. And it's funny, at Fort Dix, when we're all processing back, there's a SFC, Sergeant First Class, E7, comes in there and he says, "I need to talk to all you guys before you leave." So we were running to get out of there as soon as possible. And he says, "We really need drill sergeants. And here's what we'll do. If you go to drill sergeant school and become a drill sergeant." He put all these things out, and he offered extra bonuses, money, and all this kind of stuff, and the extra 2 weeks leave, all this kind of stuff. Not one single person that was in that group from there, was probably about 50 of us in that room. Not one single person signed up.
Wow.
Nothing. He couldn't. He had all this stuff. Nobody wanted to go. Everybody wanted to get out.
Yeah.
So I went back to Fort Monmouth, and I taught the school as an instructor that I went through, the carrier equipment school. So I went back as an instructor. But the interesting thing, when you process back in, you get back in the States, so you got to get all new uniforms and stuff. And you can keep all your Vietnam stuff if you want, which I did. But you get new uniform and stuff there when you cross back in, and then you go to payroll, and you get paid. And when you get into payroll, you got the guys coming out of basic that are at payroll waiting to get paid while they're going to go to school. Then you have the guys coming back from Vietnam that are there. And when you walk into payroll, you tell them who you are, and you get paid by rank. Highest ranking guys go right up. If you're a B6 or a captain or officer, you're right in front of the line. If you're NCO, you're right behind them. If you're a private or private E1 or a corporal, you wait your turn. So I was an E5 sergeant, and so I'd walk in there, and there's no, I'm the highest ranked person, so I'm there for 5 minutes, and they call my name to go up to get my paperwork. And as I'm walking up there, I'm watching all these eyes. They watch me from the time I get up all the way up. All these new guys that are coming in, and they're looking at me like, this guy just got back.
Oh, right.
And I'm looking around. I'm trying not to smile, trying to keep a straight face. But I'm back. I'm home. I did my duty, and I made it back. Some people didn't.
Yeah.
And you see all these guys there, and they're looking at you, and they're thinking, "Wow." And I was wondering what their thought was, but you could see they're watching you very close. You go up there, you get your paycheck, and you walk out the door. And as I was walking out the door, I was watching everybody follow all my steps. All those guys sitting there waiting to get paid. And I thought, man, I remember that a year before when I was in that spot a year ago or a year and a half ago. So.
Now, did you have when you were back in the States, both for your R&R and then when you finally came back for good, did you ever have any problems with civilians that many did as far as protesting against you seeing you in uniform? Or
well, I was still in the Army in Fort Monmouth. I was married, so my wife had an apartment, and I lived off base. I was off base. I just came on. It was that period where I was an instructor was kind of like a regular job. I'd get there in the morning and teach the class, and at 4 o'clock when it was over, I'd get in the car and go back home, Monday through Friday, off on the weekends, just like a regular job, job, because that was, I'm E5, so I'm there teaching, and I already did my duties and stuff. So, and of course, when I was going to the school, we did the same thing. The people that I was teaching, you're sitting there, and the guys that are teaching me had been to Vietnam and always trying to get them to tell stories. What was this like? What did you do? Tell a story. And so when I was there, they're always doing the same thing to me. Tell us a story. What did you do? Or where were you at? What was it like? They always want to know the stories all the time. But you had to get the instruction out. So, at least 3 days a week you had to tell a story. Because you just thought, well, we should. And even though you try to explain to it what it was like, you can't. Without being there, you can't. You can describe. Some people are very detailed in their descriptions and stuff, and they can make it very vivid. But if you're not there, and different, depending on where you were, like the guy I told you was just a clerk the whole time there, he has a totally different story.
Sure. Oh yeah.
Than somebody that, like myself, was out in the swamps the whole year. And so it's a totally different story.
Right.
So there was had a plane ride from Canton to Hotel 3 Saigon. Can't from reason why I got out. The CO sent me back to get something. I forget what it was now, but there's a plane called a Caribou, and it was a twin-engine cargo plane that they had the web seats that flopped down to the side for people to sit in when you were there. And so I was going to pick up some, I remember what it was, but for some reason I was going to pick up. And the Caribous, that was probably the scariest plane ride I ever had in my life. First of all, they're loosely built because they're built to where as they gain altitude and speed, things shrink up and tighten up. I don't know if that's the correct terminology, but when it takes off, it's rattling like this and it's shaking, and the whole thing's rattling and it's shaking, it's going like this and that, and the wings are doing like this, and I'm thinking, we're going to crash before we get off the ground. That was my thought. Here I am, been out in the boonies, and I'm just taking a plane ride up to Saigon, you know, and we're going to crash. As soon as it got 150 feet, 200 feet up in the air, and got some speed, everything leveled off. The noise that wasn't shaking and rattling anymore, and it flew like a regular plane. And it was just the opposite when I went to land. It started doing the same thing, you know. But man, I didn't think we were going to make it.
Wow.
So I've asked other people that were in the service, did you ever ride in the Caribou? And if they did, they said, yeah, they have the same story.
Right.
That was interesting. I got a number of I flew a lot in helicopters too. I made a number of trips when I was at Canto to Hotel 3 Saigon, for making trips for the captain, because like I said, I got to know him pretty well, just because you know, all the stuff I was doing. So he'd say, you know, he'd always need, you know, secure pouch, and you know, so what you do, I go to the Canto was an air base, so I walk over to the airfield and tell the dispatcher there, I said, I got to secure stuff that needs to go to Saigon, and you know, Hotel 3 Saigon. He says, okay, we got a guy flying up, I'll let you know. If I can't get you out in 30 minutes, I'll assign somebody to fly you up there, because it's courier, so to speak. And I did that 3 separate times, and then I went in there and just flew up, and there's all Hueys, Huey up, Huey back, 2 gunners on the side. And then one time I had a ride in a Chinook. You know, the Chinooks, like I said, came in and brought a lot of supplies to us, because you could unload stuff, barrels of diesel fuel and stuff. And one trip that I was supposed to make up to Saigon with doing a carrier for the captain, the Chinook was ready to go, so they said, you ride the Chinook. Those things are the noisiest thing. They are incredibly noisy. You put the headset on, you cannot hear a thing. There's no way you can carry on a conversation without the headset.
Wow.
They are incredibly noisy inside. They're very smooth and they're very fast.
Oh, really? Yeah.
They're a fast helicopter. They really move fast. A lot of stuff inside.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So you finished out mustered out then in New Jersey after?
Yeah. Mustered out, did my time, I still had 9 months to go, and then I'd been there about 4 months. I guess it's 3 or 4 months. How long was they there before we came back to Colorado? 3 or 4 months, or she can't remember either. We had an apartment that we lived in upstairs. Her grandma had an apartment downstairs, and we had the apartment above her grandma, and it was, and we got. That's where we were staying there, but I drove back and forth to the base, and I got they called me and says, okay, we got way too many people, we're giving you a 6 months drop. So I was supposed to get out in June, and I got out in January. So I got out 6 months early. So in January, I got a call from the CO, called me in the office, he says, you got a 6 months drop, go process, start your out process. Yes! Started the out process, and got home that night and told Sharon, and says, hey, we got a drop, done. And she says, excellent, you don't have to do the Army anymore. I said, nope, I'm done. I'll be out in 2 days.
Wow.
So I went through the out process and said goodbye. And the last day I was there, I had already processed out, and I was walking out. Some first lieutenant walked by, I didn't salute him. He says, soldier, don't you salute? I says, only if I'm in the Army, I'm on my way home. He didn't say a word. Yeah.
And how was that adjustment then from being in the military and all you've been through back to civilian life?
We left New Jersey and we moved back to Fort Collins. And my wife had never been west at all.
Yeah, right.
She's been along the East Coast, never been west. And so we had bought a car. We had, of course, the Army packed up all of our goods and sent it out, paid for all that stuff. When you process out, they pay for everything. And so we were in the car, and we had driving back, and she says, "How long will it take us to Colorado?" I said, "About 3 days." I said, "Probably three. It'll be a 3-day drive to get there." She says, "Okay." So we're going out I-70, and we get to Kansas, and going through Kansas, about halfway through Kansas. She says, "I hope Colorado's not like this." I said, "No, it's not like this." I says, "Eastern Colorado is, but where I live out in the mountains, it's not like this." And we go through, and driving through Kansas, and she says, "I've never seen so much of nothing in my life," is what she tells me. She says, "All there is cornfields and cattle occasionally." You know, driving through, if you drove I-70 through Kansas, you know what I'm talking about. It hasn't changed in 100 years. So we drove there, and we got to the border and said, "Welcome to Colorado." And she looked at me, she says, "I don't see anything different than Kansas." I says, "Be patient, we'll get there." She says, "I think I'm going to cry." I said, no, just, yeah, she said, and we're driving an hour or two, and she says, "We're still in Colorado, and I haven't seen anything that's different than Kansas." Well, you know, Eastern Colorado is that's the way it is. Finally get to Lyman, where you can see the mountain range from Lyman. I said, "See, now look there, see all those mountains?" She says, "They're a long ways off." I says, "Yeah, they are, but we'll be there in a couple hours." And then we got to Denver, then she says, "Oh, town, city." And then we drove up to Fort Collins, and went to my parents' house and stayed there. And so the next day we went looking for an apartment. We had to, we're sitting at my parents' house that first day there, and my wife lived in Central Jersey. She rode the train into Newark, where she worked for a company up in Newark, and she was the secretary for the company up there in Newark, Blue Cross Blue Shield in Newark. A big building, big office building, lots of people. She worked there, and so she took the train in to work every day and came back to where we were at in South Amboy. And so we're sitting there at my parents' house the first day, and we're talking about, going to go look for an apartment. And my wife says, "Well, I want an apartment close to the train station or the bus depot." And I look at my dad and my mom, and they look at me, and we look at each other, and she looks around like, "What did I say?" And I told her, I says, "There's no train stations or bus depots here." And she says, "Oh." She says, "How do you get to work?" I says, "We drive a car everywhere we go." She says, "Really?" Totally new environment for her. Yeah. And she was a trooper. Yeah. I'd take her away from her parents. We're halfway across the country, a brand new environment. And we get a little apartment on West Mountain Avenue, nice little apartment. And she decides she wants a dog. And the landlord says no dogs, but so we get a little dog. The landlord finds out. He says, "You get rid of the dog or you leave." She didn't want to get rid of the dog. So out in LaPorte, they were building a new subdivision out there, and they had a bunch of duplexes that were in the process of being built. And my dad was contracting it, and he knew the guy that owned the land. So he said, "Well, we just finished this duplex. You got to go out there and clean it, and then you guys can move in and rent it." So we had to go out and we cleaned it. We still had all the construction mess in it. So we cleaned the whole thing up, and we moved out the duplex. No phone. There was no phones out there yet. There was a telephone pole next to the barn that had a phone on it. So if you wanted to use the phone, there was one other duplex that somebody else had just moved into. So we'd walk out there if we needed a phone. Well, that's way before cell phones, so you walk out there if you need a phone. And no mail delivery, so we had to drive into the post office there in LaPorte to get mail. And no phone, no mail. Our backyard was 80 acres of farmland. Wow. And it was a nice little duplex. We had a good time there. Yeah. This is where we stayed when we first got back, and I look back. I was probably a little bit difficult to live with for a while.
Because of your experience? Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
to make the transition back.
Sure, yeah.
I had a problem with my first job and my second job. I was, didn't, still left over from Vietnam.
Sure, yeah.
If I think about it, I probably had PTSD, but they didn't call it then. And eventually I worked through it. It took 6 months, 6-7 months before I worked through it, before I actually felt like I was okay.
Were you have any sort of nightmares or flashbacks at night, anything like that?
Not necessarily.
No, good.
Those happened later.
Oh, really?
I didn't get any of that kind of stuff till I was probably almost 2 years back before something like that happened.
Really?
And then I'd get stuff. And that continued for 4 or 5 years. Not a lot, but occasionally for 4 or 5 years that continued. And I kind of had a chip on my shoulder, to tell you the truth. I tried to, it took a while to work through it. And I was the guy that owned all that property that, they were going to build houses there, but they built the duplexes first. So since we didn't have much money, we did the final cleaning on all the new houses and the duplex. We'd go in there, wife and I, we'd clean the tubs and do all the carpets, do all the final cleaning for a little extra money. And then in the summer, the first summer we were out there, I baled hay with, for the owner. That's the hardest work I've ever did in my life.
And
Nothing's harder than baling hay and picking that up and tossing it on the trailer. That is serious work. If anybody's baled hay will tell you that. That is serious work. I did that one summer. And then I went, so I got to find a job.
yeah.
And the UPS was just coming to Colorado at that time. This is 1972. And there was a job posted in the paper that UPS is hiring. And I knew about UPS from back east, where UPS is big, but it was never out here. I went and applied for a job and got hired. I got hired at UPS. And that was, I had a little difficult time first year at UPS. Following rules and regulations.
Yeah.
But, I got in trouble, but, I got through. So I ended up spending 25 years at UPS.
Wow.
I spent the first couple of years as a package delivery driver, and I said, this is not fun anymore. So I went and got my commercial license and started driving a semi for UPS, and I did that for 20 years. I worked nights for 20 years straight. And it actually worked pretty good because during the day I had some free time, and I was really into technology, and computers were brand new, home computers were new, and I got into figuring out how to build and sell home computers, and I was doing that as a part-time job during the day. Built a lot of stuff for a lot of people. And I had 23 years in at UPS, and UPS decided they had too many people with lots of years in that were on the high end of the pay scale. So they decided to offer a 25 and out. Normal retirement was 30 years. They said, if you work 20, we'll give you a 25 and out. You can go out with full benefits, but you have to take a 20% cut in retirement pay. And I did the math, and I thought, well, I'm going to be drawing a retirement check from the next month after I get out while I'm working on another job. And I did the math, and I says, there's no way does it pay to stay another 5 years. I may get 2 or 3 raises.
Yeah.
But so I had I'd been doing computer stuff and interactive. I had lots of friends that worked at different technology places. So I told a friend of mine that worked at HP that I was going to be out. And he says, oh, you want to work here? I said, sure. So he got me talked to people that needed it. With the software test lab needed somebody to build the computers and set them up and maintain them for the lab. And so I applied for the job and got it at HP. And I applied for it when I was still at UPS. The last week I worked at UPS, I worked nights. I worked at HP during the day, and I drove a truck at night that last week. It was double dipping. And then, so when I found out that, and I knew all these guys at HP, some of them I sold them their home computer, built it for them. And so the guy said, the person I interviewed with, first he says, "You got a degree?" And I said, "No, I don't, not in computers." And he says, "You probably should do that." So UPS paid for me all my school. I went to school during the day this last years, and went to school during the day and got my degree in computer information systems. So I walked out of UPS into HP. I spent the next 8 years at Hewlett-Packard on Harmony. They're on West Harmony, Fort Collins. Had a fun time. Great job.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it completely.
Got back to your initial interest from way back.
From way back.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the people I worked with. I enjoyed everything I did there. I had so much fun at HP.
Outstanding.
And then the worst part at HP came, well, David Packard resigned from the board because he wanted to retire. And he was the last, Hewlett had already resigned, and David Packard decided. Then they hired Carly Fiorina to take over HP, and she destroyed the company. I sold all the stocks I had in HP, and the day I found out she was taking over, I sold it all. I didn't have a lot, but I bought it through the profit sharing plan at HP. And so I sold all the stock. I said, it's going to go down, and it took a huge dump the week after she took over, and it went down for a long time. She laid off my whole group of people that I worked. I was in research and development. After I did that, I moved over to R&D, and I worked on the very first digital camera HP ever made. I was on the USB team when they decided the USB came out, when the technology hit, and HP decided they were going to put USB on all their computers, all their scanners, all their equipment. So they needed a team. So they asked me if you'd like to be on the team, and he says, "Well, we want you to develop the interface between the hardware and the software." So that's what I worked on, and there was a team. We got it all set up. We tested the stuff, worked on it there at Fort Collins, and then I went up to Boise, Idaho, where all the printers are done. I went and met the printer guys, and we did all, checked with the printers, and installed USB in, made sure because initially Windows 95 was out then, Windows 3.1 and then Windows XP. They had all these different Windows versions, and by default they didn't support USB, so you had to add a driver to it to make it support USB. So we had to make sure all that stuff works. Worked on that, and really enjoyed that. And then they decided, and so our whole team, there was 8 of us, we all got laid off at the same time.
But would you have continued on, do you think, or were you getting close to retirement at that time? Or?
I was having too much fun to retire.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
I loved my job, man.
Yeah.
It was great. When I left HP, that was in 2004. When I left HP, and I'd already retired. I'd get my retirement check every month. What was nice about that is getting my retirement check every month. I didn't even use it, just put it in a 401k. Because I had a nice job at HP. And the guys at UPS thought, "No, what are you doing taking early out?" I said, "You can't make as much money as you can driving." I just grinned. I didn't even argue with him. He says, "You got a job?" And "Yeah, I do." And a couple guys says, "Can't be as much as you make in driving, because it's Teamsters, right?"
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, "Here's what my starting salary is." And he looked at me, "What?"
Excellent.
Yeah. It was $2.50 an hour more than what I was making as a truck driver to start at HP.
Yeah.
And it went up from there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's good job, good stuff.
Yeah.
That's fun. Then 2004, my wife's parents, who live in New Jersey, were getting elderly. They were having some medical issues. So my wife says, "Well, you got laid off. You've retired, your first retirement." And I said, "You laid off at HP, so let's move back east so I can take care of my parents. That's only fair.
Yeah.
We've been in Colorado all this time. It's only fair that we go back and so you can be with your parents." So we went back there. We bought a condo in southern Delaware, right on the beach, where real close to the beach, wasn't
Yeah.
right on the
Yeah.
beach, but it was walking distance. And her dad finally passed away, and her mom decided to live with us for a while. Then we couldn't take care of her, and we put her in assisted living. And she passed away, and we sold the condo and moved to Colorado, back here, because my sister's here, my son's here, cousins are here, all families here.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And her family's not around anymore. Her sister lives in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So that wasn't really close.
Right. Yeah.
So
So
moved back to Colorado. That's the story.
yeah. So just briefly, you mentioned you've got the one son.
I have one son,
Yeah.
no grandkids. They told us when they got married that they weren't having kids. And my wife and I looked at each other and we went, "Oh, no grandkids. Come on, you got to change your mind." They said, "Nope, they'd made their mind up. No, so we have no grandkids."
Yeah. So how many years now have you and Sharon been married?
54.
51. Wow.
54 years. Got married. We flew back to Colorado to get married, and the day after we got married, there was this huge snowstorm. We got sucked in. I couldn't get a flight out because the flights were closed because of the snow. I called the CO and told him, I said, "I can't get back. Flights are going. I can't get back in time." And he says, "Okay."
Yeah.
What can he say?
Yeah. Right.
I can't get back to.
Yeah. Well, as you look back on it now that you've had time to chew on your experience in Vietnam and the Vietnam War, what are your thoughts of that war?
My thoughts of the war, it wasn't necessary. We shouldn't have been there. That's it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah.
That's my thoughts.
Yeah. Fair enough.
It was, Johnson should have just shut it down when he was president. He should have just said, "We have no business there," just like we had no business in wars since then. We had no business in. We had no business in Afghanistan. If the Russians could do anything in Afghanistan, and we thought we could do better, no.
Yeah.
Bosnia, another bad one. To me, there was a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah.
And my wife says she'll never forgive Hillary Clinton for what she did to the guys left over there.
Yeah.
And I'm with her too.
Yeah.
But the honor flight, that was spectacular.
Yeah.
The camaraderie with all the other veterans. We had 5 Korean War veterans. The rest were Vietnam veterans.
Right.
We had no World War II.
Right. First flight.
First flight without a World War
Yeah.
II veteran. And I got to talk to a bunch of different people, everybody, and like I say, people have seen the memorials before. It's not the same as being on the honor flight with
Yeah.
all your buddies.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And there was Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all the different ones. We even had 2 guys from the Coast Guard. And we had 3 ladies that were nurses, all the rest were guys. And it was just the whole thing, the whole camaraderie, and the support from everybody, from when we were all talking there before we got on the plane, and to see all the people
On the parade route.
that was cool.
Yeah.
And then the fire trucks with the flag,
Yeah.
that was cool.
Yeah.
The flight, all the flight attendants that were on the flight it was a Allegheny, but it was a charter flight.
Yeah.
So all the ladies that were the flight attendants were, that was a special route. They volunteered to do it.
Right.
And they went with us on all the
Right.
buses around all.
That's the first time in all those trips they've done that. So
Yeah, they went with the
yeah.
buses.
Yeah.
They went to all the memorials with
Yeah.
us. The flight attendants did. They were interacting with the guys, and they were having a great time.
Yeah. Now, had you been to the Vietnam Wall before?
Yes, I had.
Yeah, okay.
We were in Delaware for 18
Oh,
years,
right. Oh, right.
and we'd made a number of trips to D.C.
Yeah,
I'd been
okay.
to all the memorials ahead of time. I hadn't been to the Air Force Memorial or the Iwo Jima. Those 2 I hadn't been. And I'd been to Arlington before, but I had not seen the changing of the
Oh,
guard.
good, excellent.
The change of the guard was spectacular. That was something to see.
Yeah.
I knew about it, but I'd never seen it
Yeah,
before.
yeah,
But, yeah, I'd seen all those before, and I was telling some of the guys, here's what you're going to see here. But the Iwo Jima one I hadn't seen before. We had never stopped there. But I've been to the wall 2 or 3 times, and we've been to World War II because we looked up my parents, we looked up her dad, and we looked everybody up on the kiosk there that you can look it up to World War II.
Yeah.
And I walked through those and the Korean. And we were in D.C. the day they dedicated the Martin Luther King Memorial.
Oh.
Not Martin, the Martin Luther King Memorial, the statue that's there.
Uh-huh.
The day they dedicated it, we happened to be there. We're walking around, I was thinking, what's all these people here? We walked over to see what it was, and they were doing the dedication to the memorial for Martin Luther King.
Oh.
We just happened to be there the day that happened.
Oh, excellent.
So,
Yeah.
And we went to Smithsonian, all those things. We went to Library of Congress, the Capitol building, and the most fascinating thing to me, other than the memorial, the wall, was the Library of Congress. What an amazing building, and everything that's in there, walking through there.
Yeah.
That was just fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Smithsonian is, it's fascinating too, but the Library of Congress was different. It was just, and to see the Declaration of Independence there, the original behind the glass, and all the other original documents that they had there, that was interesting to see.
Well, Mike, as I start to wind down this interview, is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted to talk about? Any other stories that floated to the top as we've been sitting here that you wanted to get out? So that I know we only probably got the tip of the iceberg of your story, but anything else we can add to round out your story, or do you think we pretty much got everything you wanted to talk about?
I pretty much have told you everything that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
There's some other details of Vietnam I don't want to discuss.
Fair enough.
And,
Fair
I
enough.
left those out.
Yeah.
There were some things that happened I left out.
Yeah.
But, the general story of what I did over there, what it was like, it was,
Well, the last question I always like to ask in these interviews is, as you look back on your time in the Army, and particularly in Vietnam, did that change you, play a role in your life, affect your life at all, or was it simply a chapter in your life that you went through? How would you answer that?
It affected my life a lot. Based upon the experience, based upon, it was war zone, based upon, there are so many things that the military, that someone who's never been in the military would never understand. When you see somebody else that's a veteran and you say hi and talk, there's a camaraderie that nobody else understands.
Yeah.
And they only understand if you've been in the military.
Yeah.
So that's special. And right now I thank the Veterans Administration for the tremendous amount of medical care that I've gotten since I got out. They're fantastic.
Oh, good.
The VA Center in Loveland, right here, the new one they built, they go out of their way to help veterans in any way they can. I haven't cost me a penny for anything.
You prepaid.
Back in November last year, I got melanoma, and it was, my wife noticed, she says, there's really black behind your ear. You're gonna have that checked out. So I called the VA and I went in there and he says, oh, that doesn't look good. We better take a slice, a little sample off and send it to pathology. And they did that. I got a call the next day. She says, it tested positive for melanoma. And we're going to send you to an eye, ear, nose and throat, at Fort Collins and that's, they're going to take care of you. So I went over there and he looked at the results and stuff, and he says, talked to me for a minute. He says, I'll let you know when your surgery is. He called me later on in the afternoon. 2 days later, I was in surgery. He says, melanoma spreads so fast, we do the surgery, we put it at the top of the surgery list because it spreads so fast. It's fastest spreading cancer. And so I got there and he says, well, he told me, he says, well, you're going to lose your earlobe. And he says, and we're going to, and they they put an, when they zap you with the nuclear stuff where it goes down through and they trace it. He says, we're going to trace the from your ear where all the lymph nodes and stuff are to see if there's been any travel. And I ran that through, and the guy was in there and he was doing the testing all down my neck and my ear and around my head to see where everything went. And of course, I didn't know what he was doing. Then the doctor came in and he says, we're going to take all the lymph nodes out of your neck because you got some there. So when I went in for surgery, as he did what he did, he cut my earlobe off. You can see it's missed compared to this ear. And they took all the lymph nodes out of my neck. And I woke up from surgery and I had this big, huge patch on the side of my face. And the doctor came in. He says, we're testing the pathology of all those lymph nodes right now. And he says, should know something within an hour. And he came back about an hour and a half later. He says, you're fortunate. He says, we got everything. He says, we got everything out. You need no chemo, no radiation. We got it 100%. He says, you were in stage 1, so we got it early enough. And he says, all you got to do is heal.
I'll be darned. Wow.
And I say, I thank the Lord for that.
Yeah, yeah.
I tell you what, the Lord's been good to me. I have no complaints.
Wow.
It's been just so good to me. I thank Him all the time.
Wow.
That's the other thing I want to mention.
That's, I think it's a good point to end on. I really want to thank you for sitting down today to tell your story. More importantly, I want to thank you for your service and welcome home.
Thank you.